3 disturbing true mall horror stories. Story 1, The Security Shift. My name is Andre, and I was 29 years old when this happened. I'd been working as a security guard at a shopping mall in Jacksonville, Florida, for about 14 months. It was a Tuesday night in mid-January, around 1:45 a.m., and I was doing my routine patrol of the upper level when I heard a sound that should not have been there. The mall had been closed for over 5 hours, and I was supposed to be completely alone. But somewhere in the darkness ahead of me, I could hear footsteps. Before I continue, make sure you hit that subscribe button and leave a comment telling me where you're watching from, because what I discovered that night changed the way I see empty buildings forever. The mall was one of those older shopping centres that had seen better days. 2 levels, about 120 stores, anchored by a department store on each end. During the day it was moderately busy. Family shopping, teenagers hanging out in the food court, elderly people doing their morning walks before the stores opened. But at night, after everything closed down and the last employees went home, it transformed into something else entirely. Miles of empty corridors, storefronts locked behind metal gates, emergency lights casted dim pools of illumination every 50 feet or so. The silence was the strangest part. During operating hours, there was always noise. Music from the stores, conversations, the fountain in the center atrium. At night, you could hear your own heartbeat. I'd worked the overnight shift since I started, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., 4 nights a week. My job was simple. Walk the building, check the doors, make sure nobody had broken in or gotten locked inside, respond to any alarms. Most nights were uneventful. I would do my rounds, sit in the security office, watching cameras, maybe read a book, or study for the online classes I was taking. The scariest thing I usually encountered was a raccoon that had somehow gotten into the loading dock area. That Tuesday night started like any other. I clocked in at 10, did my first full patrol around 10:30, checked in with the other guard on duty at the south entrance. His name was Terrell Goodguy, former Marine. He was stationed at the security booth near the main entrance, where he could monitor the parking lot cameras. I handled the interior patrols. Around midnight, I settled into the main security office on the 2nd floor. Banks of monitors showing feeds from cameras throughout the building. Most of them showed nothing but empty hallways and dark storefronts. I made some coffee, pulled out my laptop, started working on an assignment for my business management class. At 1:30, I started my 2nd patrol of the night. I always took the same route. Start at the security office, head down the east corridor, loop around through the food court, check the department store entrances, then come back up the west corridor. Total distance was about 1.5 miles. Usually took me 45 minutes to an hour, depending on how thorough I was checking doors. I was about 15 minutes into my patrol, walking through the section near the old movie theatre that had closed down 2 years ago, when I heard the footsteps. They were coming from somewhere ahead of me, around the corner where the corridor turned toward the food court. Heavy footsteps like boots on tile, deliberate and slow. I stopped walking and listened. The footsteps stopped too. I keyed my radio and called Terrell. I asked him if he had come inside for any reason. He said no. He was still at the booth, had not moved in an hour. I told him I was hearing movement on the 2nd level near the old theatre. He said he would check the cameras and call me back. I waited. The corridor stretched out in front of me, disappearing around the corner. The only light came from the emergency fixtures, barely enough to see 20 feet ahead. I pulled out my flashlight and clicked it on. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the shuttered storefronts on either side. A jewelry store, a shoe store, a place that used to sell candles. Terrell's voice crackled over the radio. He said he checked the cameras for that section, but 2 of them were offline. Had been offline since around 11. He had not noticed because the system showed them as active, just with no feed. Some kind of technical glitch. That made me nervous. 2 cameras going offline at the same time in the same section was not a glitch. Someone had disabled them. I told Terrell I was going to continue my patrol, but stay alert. He said he would call the police and have them send a unit to do a drive-by just in case. I appreciated that. Better safe than sorry. I started walking again slower, this time flashlight sweeping left and right. My other hand rested on my belt near my radio. Security guards at this mall did not carry weapons. Company policy. I had a flashlight, a radio, and a can of pepper spray. That was it. I came around the corner and the corridor opened up into the food court area. Tables and chairs stacked against the walls, fast food counters all locked up behind metal shutters. The massive skylights overhead let in a faint glow from the parking lot lights outside. It was brighter here, easier to see. Nobody there. The food court was empty, but something was wrong. I could feel it. That prickling sensation on the back of your neck when you know someone is watching you. I scanned the area with my flashlight, checking the shadows behind the counters, the corners near the restrooms. That is when I saw it. One of the bathroom doors, the one for the family restroom, was slightly open. It should have been locked. I had checked it during my first patrol. I remembered turning the handle and confirming it was secure. I approached slowly. Flashlight pointed at the door. I called out, announced that I was security, asked if anyone was in there. No response. I pushed the door open with my foot flashlight leading the way. The bathroom was small, single toilet sink changing table. The light was off, but my flashlight illuminated every corner. Empty. But on the floor, near the base of the toilet, there was a sleeping bag. And next to the sleeping bag, a backpack. Someone had been staying here. I backed out of the bathroom and keyed my radio. I told Terrell what I found, told him to make sure the police were coming, and to request they bring more units. This was not a technical glitch. Someone was in the building. Terrell confirmed he was on it. He told me to get back to the security office and wait for the police. Good advice. Smart advice. I turned to head back the way I came, and that is when I saw him. He was standing at the far end of the food court, maybe 70 feet away, near the entrance to the west corridor. I could not make out his face in the darkness, just a silhouette. Average height, wearing what looked like a bulky jacket. He was completely still, just standing there watching me. I froze. My hand went to my pepper spray. I called out to him, told him the mall was closed, asked him to identify himself. He did not respond. He did not move. For maybe 10 seconds, we just stood there, staring at each other across the empty food court. Then he turned and walked into the west corridor, disappearing into the darkness. I did not follow him. I am not stupid. I radioed Terrell and told him the subject was heading toward the west exit. Then I took the long way around, through the east corridor, back toward the security office. I moved fast, checking over my shoulder every few seconds. I made it to the office and locked the door behind me. The monitors showed empty corridors everywhere. The cameras in the section where I had seen him were still offline. I had no way of tracking where he went. The police arrived about 12 minutes later. 4 officers entered the building through the south entrance where Terrell was stationed. They did a full sweep, checking every corridor, every storage room, every bathroom. It took them almost 2 hours. They found evidence of someone living in the mall, not just the sleeping bag in the bathroom. They found a whole camp set up in the ceiling space above one of the vacant stores. The store had been empty for months, waiting for a new tenant. Someone had removed one of the ceiling tiles from inside the store and created a living space in the crawlway above. There was bedding up there, food wrappers, water bottles, and a collection of items that made the officers exchange concerned looks. There were photographs. Dozens of photographs printed on regular paper of mall employees and security guards. People coming to work, people leaving people on their breaks. There were photographs of me. 6 different photos taken over several weeks showing me doing my patrols, sitting in the security office, walking through the parking lot. And there was a schedule, a handwritten schedule showing the patrol routes and timing for every security guard on staff. He had been watching us, learning our patterns, figuring out when each section of the mall would be unoccupied. But the worst thing they found was a collection of newspaper clippings, articles about missing persons assaults and unsolved crimes from malls across the southeast. Jacksonville, Atlanta, Tampa, Charlotte. The clippings went back almost 5 years. They never caught him. By the time the police arrived, he was gone. He must have had an exit route planned, probably through the loading dock, or one of the emergency exits with a disabled alarm. The police investigated, compared notes with other departments, but no arrests were ever made. The mall upgraded its security system after that. More cameras, better coverage, regular checks of the ceiling spaces and vacant stores. They hired 2 additional guards for the overnight shift so no one patrolled alone anymore. I quit 3 weeks later. I couldn't walk those corridors at night without feeling watched. Every shadow, every unexpected sound made my heart race. I kept thinking about those photographs, about someone sitting in the ceiling above me, watching through some crack or hole I could not see. I work in an office now, 9 to 5, surrounded by people, fluorescent lights and open floor plans, and co-workers I can see at all times. But sometimes, when I am alone in a building after hours, I find myself looking up at the ceiling tiles, wondering what might be up there, wondering if someone is looking back. Story 2. The Fitting Room. My name is Garrett, and I was 24 years old, working as a retail associate at a department store in a mall outside Denver, Colorado. It was a Saturday afternoon in late March, busy with weekend shoppers, when a customer asked me to unlock a fitting room for her. I walked her back to the fitting room area, opened one of the doors with my key, and let her in. 30 seconds later, she started screaming. What we found in the ceiling of that fitting room is something that still makes me sick to think about. If you're enjoying these stories, do me a favor and hit that like button. And stick around, because this one gets worse before it gets better. I had been working at that department store for about 8 months. It was a decent job, nothing special. I worked in the men's section, mostly folding clothes, helping customers find sizes, running the register when needed. The fitting rooms were in the back corner of the store, a row of about 12 individual rooms, with doors that locked from the inside. Standard setup. You see them in every department store. That Saturday was busier than usual because there was some kind of sale going on. The store was packed with customers, and we were short-staffed because 2 people had called in sick. I was running around trying to help everyone, answering questions, restocking shelves, dealing with the usual retail chaos. Around 3:30 in the afternoon, a woman approached me and asked if I could unlock a fitting room for her. She had an armful of clothes she wanted to try on. I grabbed my key and walked her back to the fitting room area. The fitting rooms were arranged in a row along the back wall. There was a small waiting area with some chairs and mirrors, and then the individual rooms. Each room had a door with a lock and a little indicator that showed red for occupied and green for available. Most of them showed red, which was typical for a Saturday afternoon. I found one that was showing green room number 7 and unlocked the door for her. She thanked me and went inside. I turned to walk back to the sales floor. I had taken maybe 3 steps when she screamed. Not a startled yelp or an annoyed exclamation. A full, terrified scream that echoed through the entire store. I ran back to the room and knocked on the door, asked if she was okay. She threw the door open and pushed past me, her face white as paper. She was pointing at the ceiling, trying to say something, but the words were not coming out. Finally, she managed to say that there was a hole in the ceiling, and she had seen an eye looking down at her. At first, I thought she must be mistaken. The ceiling in the fitting rooms was just standard drop ceiling tiles, the kind you see in any commercial building. I looked into the room, looked up at the ceiling. Sure enough, there was a small hole in one of the tiles, maybe an inch in diameter. It was positioned directly above the center of the room, where someone would stand to look in the mirror. I felt my stomach drop. I told the woman to wait right there and ran to find my manager. Her name was Patricia, mid-40s, been working retail for 20 years. I told her what the customer had seen. Patricia's face went serious. She told me to close off the fitting room area, do not let anyone in or out. Then she called mall security. They arrived in about 4 minutes. 2 security guards, a man and a woman. They looked at the hole in the ceiling, asked the customer some questions, then told us they were going to access the space above the ceiling to see if anyone was up there. There was an access panel in the stockroom that led to the ceiling crawl space. The male security guard climbed up while the female stayed below with us. We waited. 5 minutes, 10 minutes. It was silent up there. I was starting to think maybe the customer had imagined it. Maybe it was just a shadow or a trick of the light. Then the security guard's voice came crackling over the radio. He said we needed to call the police. He said there was someone up there. Not anymore, but there had been. There was a whole setup. Blankets, pillow bottles filled with urine, and a smartphone mounted on a small tripod pointed at one of the holes in the ceiling. Someone had been living in the ceiling above the fitting rooms, watching people change, recording them. The police arrived about 20 minutes later. They evacuated the store and did a thorough search of the ceiling space. They found the setup the security guard had described, plus 3 more phones positioned above 3 different fitting rooms. They also found multiple holes that had been drilled through the ceiling tiles, all of them positioned directly above the changing areas. The phones had been recording. The police took them as evidence, but based on what they told my manager later, there were hundreds of videos. Hundreds of people, mostly women, filmed without their knowledge or consent while they changed clothes. The store was closed for 3 days while the investigation continued. Corporate sent a team to inspect all the fitting rooms, replace the ceiling tiles, install new security measures. When we reopened, there was a camera in the fitting room waiting area and an employee stationed there at all times. But the person who had done this was never found. Not while I was working there anyway. The police had the phones, had the videos, but they could not identify who had put them there. The phones were prepaid burners purchased with cash, no identifying information. What haunted me most was trying to figure out how long this had been going on. The store had been open for over 15 years. Those ceiling tiles could have had holes in them for months, years even. Thousands of customers had used those fitting rooms, and any one of them could have been filmed. I quit about 2 weeks after we reopened. I could not stand being in that building anymore, knowing what had happened above our heads while we were working, while customers were shopping, while everyone went about their normal lives, completely unaware. But here is the part that I cannot stop thinking about. After I quit, I started paying attention to the news. About 3 months later, there was a story about a similar setup being discovered at a mall in Kansas City. Same thing. Holes in the ceiling tiles above fitting rooms, phones recording someone living in the crawl space. Then 6 months after that, a mall in Oklahoma City. Then one in Memphis. The details were always the same. Drop ceiling tiles, small holes, recording devices, evidence of someone living in the space for extended periods. And in every case, the person responsible was never caught. I do not know if it is the same person moving from mall to mall, or if there are multiple people doing this, or if it has become some kind of sick trend. What I do know is that every time I have to use a fitting room, now I look up at the ceiling first. I check for holes. I check for anything that looks out of place. And most of the time, I just hold the clothes up to myself in front of a mirror on the sales floor and skip the fitting room entirely. Because you never know who might be watching. You never know what might be above your head, hidden behind those cheap ceiling tiles, recording everything. And the worst part is, the people doing this know exactly what they are doing. They know how to stay hidden. They know how to avoid getting caught. And they know there are plenty of malls, plenty of stores, plenty of fitting rooms where no one has thought to look up. Check the ceiling next time, please. Just check. Story 3. The Parking Garage. My name is Thomas. I was 32 years old, recently divorced, and I was doing some late-night shopping at a mall in Phoenix, Arizona, trying to distract myself from the emptiness of my new apartment. It was a Thursday night in November, around 9:15 p.m., and the mall was getting ready to close. I had parked on the 4th level of the parking garage because all the lower levels had been full when I arrived. What happened in that garage as I walked to my car is the reason I do not go to malls alone anymore. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications if you want to hear more stories like this. and please, learn from what happened to me. The mall was one of those upscale shopping centers with expensive stores and restaurants that charged $30 for a salad. I was not there to shop for anything in particular. I just needed to be around people, to feel some sense of normal life. The divorce had been finalized 2 weeks earlier, and sitting alone in my apartment was driving me crazy. I wandered through the mall for a couple of hours, looked at clothes I did not buy, ate dinner at one of the restaurants people watched from a bench near the fountain. By the time 9 o'clock rolled around, the stores were starting to close their gates and the crowds were thinning out. I decided it was time to head home. The parking garage was attached to the mall on the east side. It was one of those massive concrete structures with 5 levels color-coded so you could remember where you parked. I had parked on the 4th level, the purple level, in a spot near the far corner, because that was all that was available when I arrived at 5:30. I took the elevator up to the 4th level. The doors opened and I stepped out into the garage. It was noticeably emptier than when I had arrived. My car, a silver Honda Accord, was visible about 100 yards away, one of maybe 15 cars still on this level. The lighting was that harsh fluorescent that makes everything look sickly and washed out. The air smelled like concrete dust and exhaust fumes. I started walking toward my car keys already in my hand. My footsteps echoed off the concrete walls and low ceiling. It was quiet, except for the distant hum of ventilation fans somewhere below. I was about halfway to my car when I noticed a van parked 2 spots away from mine. It was a dark blue cargo van, the kind with no windows in the back. It had not been there when I parked. The space next to my car had been empty. I slowed down, but kept walking. Plenty of people drove vans. It did not mean anything. But I found myself gripping my keys a little tighter, the largest key poking out between my fingers like my mother had taught me years ago. I was about 30 feet from my car when the van's side door slid open. Nobody got out. The door just slid open, revealing darkness inside. I stopped walking. My heart started beating faster. Every instinct told me something was wrong. I looked around the parking level. There was nobody else visible. No other people walking to their cars, no security guards, nothing. Just me and this van with its door hanging open. I made a decision. I was not going to my car. Not right now. I turned around and started walking back toward the elevator. Fast, but not running. I did not want to look panicked in case I was being paranoid, but I was not going to take any chances. I was maybe 20 feet from the elevator when I heard footsteps behind me. I glanced over my shoulder. A man had gotten out of the van and was walking in my direction. He was big, probably 6 feet tall, and 200+ pounds, wearing dark clothes. His pace was matching mine, maybe slightly faster. I sped up. So did he. I broke into a jog. The elevator was right there, maybe 30 feet away. I could make it. That is when I heard a second set of footsteps, coming from my left, from between 2 parked cars. Another man, also big, also wearing dark clothes, cutting off my path to the elevator. I stopped. They stopped. We stood there in that concrete garage, maybe 40 feet apart, forming a triangle. The 2 men exchanged a look, then started walking toward me again. Slower now, deliberate, like they knew I had nowhere to go. I ran. not toward the elevator. That path was blocked. I ran toward the stairwell on the opposite side of the garage. It was further away, maybe 60 yards, but it was my only option. My shoes slapped against the concrete as I sprinted. I could hear them behind me, their footsteps pounding, getting closer. One of them yelled something I could not understand. I did not turn around. I just ran. The stairwell door was 20 yards away. 15. 10. I slammed into the door, pushed the handle down, threw it open. I was through and into the stairwell, my footsteps echoing in the concrete shaft. I started running down, taking the stairs 2 at a time, hand sliding along the metal railing. 2nd floor, 3rd floor. I was gasping for breath, my legs burning, but I did not stop. Behind me, I heard the stairwell door bang open. They were in the stairwell with me. I burst through the door on the ground level. I was in another section of the garage near the exit to the street. There were more cars here, more lighting, and I could see people. A couple walking toward their car, maybe 50 yards away. A security guard on a golf cart near the exit booth. I ran toward the security guard, waving my arms, yelling for help. He looked up, startled, and started driving toward me. I pointed behind me, tried to explain that men were chasing me. He radioed for backup and told me to get in the golf cart. I climbed in beside him, and we drove toward the exit booth, where there were more people, more cameras, more safety. I looked back at the stairwell door. It was closed. The 2 men had not followed me out. The police arrived about 10 minutes later. I gave them descriptions of the men and the van. They searched the garage every level, but found nothing. The van was gone. The men were gone. It was like they had never been there. The police took my statement and said they would investigate. A few days later, a detective called me with an update. They had reviewed the parking garage security footage. The van had entered the garage at 6:45 p.m. and had been sitting in that spot for over 2 hours before I walked out to my car. The 2 men had gotten out once. During that time, walked around the level looking at different cars, then gotten back in the van and waited. They had been hunting, looking for the right target. And when I walked out of that elevator alone with no one else around, I became that target. The detectives said they were still trying to identify the men and the van, but the footage was grainy, and the license plate was obscured. He said these types of incidents were more common than people realized. He said I was lucky. Lucky. That word stuck with me. Lucky because I noticed the van before I reached my car. Lucky because I did not freeze when I saw the door open. Lucky because there was a stairwell nearby and a security guard on the ground level. Lucky because 100 small things went right instead of wrong. But what about all the people who were not lucky? What about the person those men found before me or after me? Someone who did not notice the van, who didn't run fast enough, who did not have a stairwell nearby. I moved to a different part of the city 2 months later. Different mall, different parking situation. I never park in parking garages anymore. I will drive around for 20 minutes looking for a street spot before I go into a garage. And if I absolutely have to use a garage, I only go during the day, only when it is crowded. And I walk with my phone in my hand, ready to dial 911. That detective said I was lucky. Maybe he was right. But luck is not something you can count on. It runs out eventually. The only thing you can count on is being aware, being prepared, and trusting that voice in your head that tells you something is not right. That night in the garage, that voice told me not to walk to my car. I listened, and that is why I am here to tell you this story. Those were 3 disturbing true stories from shopping malls. These are places we go to buy clothes, eat food, spend time with family and friends. We think of them as safe public spaces where nothing bad can happen because there are always people around. But, as these stories show, malls have dark corners, hidden spaces, and quiet moments when nobody is watching. The parking garages empty out, the stores close down, the crowds go home. And sometimes the people who remain are not there to shop. Be aware of your surroundings. Park close to entrances and exits. Do not be afraid to ask security to escort you to your car. Check fitting room ceilings. Trust your instincts. Because the thing about public spaces is that they are public for everyone, including the people who mean to do harm. And sometimes the only thing standing between you and danger is your own awareness. Stay safe out there.